So hello, it's an absolute pleasure to be sitting here with Daiman Baker.
Good morning.
Today, we're going to talk quickly about confidence and how crucial it is both in your personal and professional life. If you could just give a quick background of just your career, just the cliff notes and your big
definitely.
roles you had.
Yep. So I grew up in Los Angeles. I went to university at a really good school called University of California, San Diego. Amazing school. I went to law school. I was a lawyer in LA for about 4 years. I then went to business school in France. And then through that, I started working in financial services and investment banks in London. And I've been working in and around that industry for 20 years. Me in a nutshell.
Financial services and investment banking, from what I've heard, it can be quite a cutthroat industry. An industry where you don't always know if you're going to have a job next week if you're not hitting certain targets that they want you to hit. Did you find that, you know, having confidence and a bit of self-belief kind of got you through those early years in that industry?
You know what okay, let me come back to Hollywood, because my first job out of law school when I was in LA was at a movie studio. And how did I get into that? And this is, I think, this blends in with the whole conversation around confidence through my network. So I'm a big believer in qualifications. I'm a bigger believer, I think, in network and the power of leveraging your network when you have people who buy into you and your story and are willing to take a chance on pushing you out into the world. So there were some key people that ended up getting me my first job in Hollywood. That industry is cutthroat. And so not only did I have the experience of working in that industry, but I had a slight advantage, I think, in growing up in Los Angeles. And it's like growing up anywhere, you know, you are exposed to different types of people early on in life. And it's not that it's the norm, but there's a familiarity with it. And with familiarity with anything comes confidence in dealing with it and navigating through it. So working in a cutthroat environment like investment banking wasn't completely new to me, because there were a lot of character traits that I'd seen when I worked in Hollywood. Now, one of the things that really has helped me stay in this industry, and it's by choice, is, you know, being proactive. That's definitely one. Is, you know, you've heard the expression reading the tea leaves, reading the room. And that comes from observing people. So I think sometimes people get this idea in their head that confidence is just about going into the world all brash and bravado. It's like, no, a lot of times it comes from observing your context and then figuring out a way to best maneuver through it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, you mentioned being kind of almost thrown into a world that, you know, confidence and developing your network is sort of key. And that's obviously served you later in your career because you picked up skills that surround confidence. Do you think that your development just happened early and then stopped there with regards to confidence? Or do you think you were constantly hit with moments where you had no choice but to knuckle down and give it your best shot?
Yeah, I'm going to swirl in my experience with surfing as well, because, you know, a trait like confidence, it doesn't manifest only in the professional world, right? It manifests everywhere. Walking up to people in bars, you know, surfing, that kind of a thing. And so I'm going to take one story from law school, and then I'm going to pull in something from the surfing world, because to me, confidence is ever evolving, right? It's not like you get to one point and you're like, great, now I'm confident. It's like, no. Depending on your context, right? It does develop. And so that's one thing that I just wanted to put out there. When I was in law school, first year of law school, we had to do a moot court competition, which is, you know, you're like a fake sort of advocacy exercise. The first day we were told to prepare, so it was me and my partner, and we were told to prepare a quick 4 or 5 minute presentation to 2 other team members in the room, 2 of the older law students who were kind of our mentors, and my other partner. So there were 5 people watching me do a 4 to 5 minute presentation. Linus, I was flubbing, I was nervous, I was, and I remember thinking to myself, dude, if this is not you, like, what's going on? You're not confident. And I promised myself in that moment, I'm never going to be this uncertain again in public speaking. And so, and this is part of building confidence, I would look for opportunities to develop my public speaking skills. And it happened pretty quickly. So by the time I was in second year of law school, I was chosen to represent my school at a national moot court competition. So that was something I was really focused on. It took me a year to get to that point where, I was flown off to Chicago and represented my school. And I actually did pretty well in those rounds. Anyway, you have to look for opportunities to get, and you've heard this before, outside of your comfort zone, because that's where the fun is. That's where the confidence lies, right? But it's got to be a conscious decision.
Yeah. You can't just be, I think sometimes, when you find yourself out of your comfort zone, but you haven't put yourself there, the development and the knowledge and the skills that you're going to get out of that aren't going to come. But whereas if you've said to yourself, right, I'm going to do this, it's not my forte, but I'm going to give it my best shot, you will constantly have that I'm going to develop in your mind, and you start to pick up skills.
Yeah, you do. And when it's deliberate like that, I think you're right. There's more stickability. Otherwise, it's almost survival. Like, if you're thrown into a situation, you're like, holy crap, what do I do now? It's like your survival instincts kick in. Now, everyone has different survival instincts, right? Some people calm down naturally in that type of a situation, but there is growth that happens there, but it does feel different when it's deliberate, right? Because it's like, what, I'm choosing to do this. And I found that I've learned things about myself in those kind of, high pressure, almost survival situations, such as in surfing.
Surfing, yeah.
Right. And that's where I'm like terrified sometimes. I mean, I look back at early days when I was surfing, waves would be, 2 meters, and I was literally freaked out, but I made it through. Now it's nothing. It's like, I'm probably not going to paddle out unless it's 2 meters, right? It's a different level. But being deliberate.
I think as well. I think as well, when you're particularly when you're surfing, and you can transform this into life, both personal and professional, is, when you've got no choice but to get on a wave, because it's either that or you're getting rinsed. You won't surf it well. You're just going to probably go straight down. You're not going to cut the line. Nothing's going to happen. But when you make a conscious decision to get on a massive, 6 or 7 footer, you're going to surf that much better, because you've made that decision and you've thrown yourself into that situation rather than just having to white knuckle it.
That's a big one. There was someone, I can't remember who told me this or where I heard this, but it has stuck with me for like decades. And it went along the lines of this. It's like, you're faced with a situation, like, you're scared to do something. And they're like, do the thing that you're scared of doing and get the courage for it afterwards. Yeah. Now, it might sound a bit silly or whatever. You can unpick that if you like. But the point is I've been in those situations a number of times. And it's basically, the message is, don't overthink it. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just literally just do it. And you'll realize, oh, it actually wasn't that bad. And I might have failed. And this is something I want to talk about, especially with the kids, is getting comfortable with the idea of failure. Now, this to me is a big cultural difference between the US and the UK. High level generalization. But I think in the US, we're a lot better at embracing failure. Like, just give it a try. You might blow it. So what? What's going to happen? My reputation. And that's where the English, I think, get it wrong, is, my reputation, and failure. It's just like, you prevent yourself from so much richness in life. You prevent yourself from so much when you do that. Who gives a shit? Just give it a try. Yeah, you're going to fail, but you're going to learn from that. And so that's the other thing about being deliberate. You just got to push yourself out there. And it sounds easy and it sounds like I'm being cavalier, but sometimes that attitude is what's required. Now, there's something else I'm going to talk about, which might feel controversial at first, but bear with me. There have been studies, and you need to look it up and do the Googling yourself, but between men and women, and how they, generalization, will approach these types of situations. And the quote that kind of sticks out, and I wish I could find the study, it went something like this. A lot of women will wait until they're 100% ready, prepared, before they go and they do something that, that's potentially risky. Whereas guys will be like 42% ready, right? And let's go.
Sometimes less.
Yeah, or less. And just give it a try. And I know that there's a lot of nuance in that. And I know that, if a woman fails, then society's going to jump on her a lot more, or as a Black person, but at some point you got to get past what other people think. and just take the leap.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, actually, we were talking a lot about confidence. It was about two-hour conversation. And he asked me, he's like, I think your confidence comes from, not caring what other people think of you. And I picked up on that and I said, yeah, but I think I'm less confident sometimes because I'm caring too much about what people don't think of me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a key thing, because you also mentioned the, kind of just do it, Nike attitude to life. And I'm going to talk about this a lot on every episode, but the way I've tried to live my life is the way that the Joker does things in The Dark Knight, where he says to Harvey Dent, he says, I just do things. Because sometimes you've got to worry about the courage later.
And
you just
do.
jump.
The other thing that's important too is making sure that when you're going out and just doing things, you're not infringing on other people, right? That's something that's key, and that's where that's a big message, and it's something that I try to develop in myself and also in the kids. It's like, okay, yeah, it's great, go out and try these things and fail and all that, but don't take other people with you, man. Think about the consequences that it could have on others, and that I think is an important message to get over, especially for the kids.
Speaking of your kids, obviously I'm not a father or anything, but what I've noticed in young people is we've got a whole wave in the last 5 years of more awareness for mental health issues. And I think that that's done both positive and negative things. And that might be a controversial statement, but I'm going to qualify it in the sense that, for example, if you take social anxiety, now people who are socially anxious tend not to be as confident as people that aren't. And what we saw a pandemic hit where we all basically went inside and no longer had to deal with people on a day-to-day in person.
Yeah.
And me just thinking myself what that must have done for someone that was already socially anxious, now coming out of the pandemic and having to be put in those situations where you're networking in person, or you're doing job interviews, or you're an acting student, for example, now you're getting on stage. That must be very difficult. So is confidence something you're instilling in your children from a young age? And if you are, how are you doing that?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. One, by example. And that's leading by example, like, literally doing these things and then talking about my thought process in those situations. So it helps them get an insight, because it's easy to look at, and this is something that happened. This is why celebrity culture is so strange to me, right? Is people will look at the person doing the amazing thing and they'll only see that little like snapshot, but what they don't see is all the buildup behind it. They don't always understand the context of that person's situation. And so what I try to do is give my kids an insight into my thinking. It's like, the reason why I'm doing this is this, and this, and this. So they might think, whatever, I'm driving recklessly. It's like, no, there's, 30 years of driving experience behind me driving like this. Do as I say, not as I do, right? That's the kind of, but the point is to give them the insight. The other lead by example is I open up a lot of space for them to challenge authority, me. So I will say to them, whatever, clean your room. And then they do have the opportunity, and they, of course, often take it, where they can provide me a counter argument, right? So like, Dad, I don't want to, whatever, go to the store. I don't want to clean my room. What's your argument? Because I want them to start thinking through why, right? So it's not just do these things. I want them to build that context for themselves. And like I said, challenging authority, public speaking, these are absolute essentials, I think, going forward. And so I don't give them really opportunities on public speaking. I had to think about that one. But on challenging, I think that's key, because otherwise you're just going to be a pushover. Yeah. And when you understand why you want to do something, or you understand why you don't want to take instruction from someone, that to me, those are building blocks of confidence.
Yeah.
Because you know what it is you want and why.
Yeah, I think my first experiences of things like public speaking were actually in front of my family. Ever since like a young age, like 9 or 10, I would do a speech on my birthday.
Got
and all my friends would be there, cocky young me, saying how blessed they all are to be in my presence. But then I think when you're doing stuff like that at a young age, and then you hit university, particularly university, those small things that you've done, you see the difference, because you can immediately pick out of the crowd those who wouldn't be willing to get up on stage in front of hundreds, or sometimes even fewer, like 10, 15 people, and do a presentation. And, this podcast is, aimed at university students of all kind of industries and degrees, like acting, finance, law, whatever. But I really think, and I really believe, that confidence is important for all of them. And in equal measure. But obviously there are different types of confidence. I just want to ask you as a person of color, going into, the industries that you've been into, do you feel that you had to have more confidence?
And this is a good segue into discussing skills, right? So confidence is definitely one thing. Cockiness is something else.
Yeah.
But where does that develop? It's not, just me slamming together a lifetime of just do it experiences. There's a lot of skills behind that. And what I've noticed, and this happens, it's not just because I'm a Black man, it's just someone comes into a situation and people, like to challenge. So, like the incumbents, the old guard, they challenge. And number one, you need to be able to not defend yourself, because that sounds too, of course, defensive, but you need to be able to hold your own. Okay, now what's that based on? For me, it's based on skills. So the context for me working in Hollywood was, okay, I just come out of law school, and that already puts me in the top X% of people, at least on the educational side of things. That's great. That gets me in the door. But what's going to keep me in there?
Yeah.
It's how I use that. So it's not being a jerk to people, but it is, holding my own in these situations. And so that was always a good fallback, my skills. Then take that into the investment banking world, where there were even fewer Black people. And I would say this a lot. I mean, I've worked on a lot of trading floors in the city. I can't tell you how many times there'd be like less than 5 people of color working on a trading floor of like hundreds, who were not security guards or cleaners or secretaries, PAs. Not that those are, I'm not looking down on those professions. What I'm saying is that you just don't see people of color. And I'm not talking about people from India and whatnot, because there's a different set of stereotypes that come when you see a person who's from India versus a Black man. Okay, that's just reality. And so how I'm treated is very different than how they're treated. So I don't necessarily put us in the same camp, even though they are a person of color. That said, there were so many times I needed to rely on my skills and on maintaining a real cool, level head when I was confronted with people who were just being dicks to me. Right. And I could sit around and bang the drum and go, oh, you're being this way because I'm Black. It's like, okay, great. That's an observation. Now what? What are you gonna do with that observation? Right. And that's when I needed to really find in myself, defend myself in some situations, but push myself out there in others. And I'm telling you, man, it was all on skills. Right. And not all, but a lot of it was that, because then I could slap them with. I'd be like, okay, the reason why I've said this, this, and this is because whatever, I've read the law. I understand something very different than you do. And then it's putting it back on them. So what do you think? And then that's where you can start unpicking people's arguments and not showing them up or showing them to be an idiot, but there's a level of engagement there. Because a lot of times people get nervous, right? That's the stereotype I found. They see a Black man, they get scared. They see a Black man, they think you're not qualified. So for me, relying on my skills, has helped me get through those situations. And then just being like an affable person. You don't have to be a dick to people. Just be cool.
Yeah, I
don't know. Is that because I grew up in LA? I don't know, but
no, I think I was talking about the other day actually. If someone's well mannered in a conversation, especially one where they're maybe out of their depth, it actually shows more confidence. Because I think when people just say the first thing that pops into their head, just because you're speaking And just because you're the only one speaking does not necessarily mean you're confident. If you're actually saying the first thing that pops into your head, that's the first sign of nerves.
Oh yeah, totally. That's a red flag to me.
and as well, for me particularly, the one thing that, even though I'm fairly confident, I'm still developing it myself, is having the confidence to actually say, I don't know.
That's a big one, especially with guys.
I mean, when I first started working with you, for example, I would tend to say, oh yeah, I've heard of that. I know. And when sometimes I actually didn't, just because I felt that, oh no, if I say I don't know, I'm going to be in the doghouse here. But it's actually not the case, because if you say I don't know, funnily enough, you get a very detailed explanation as to what it is, and that's good.
That's where the learning happens. On the other side of it, though, and there are people out there, bosses, whatever, who will, they will slay you if you ever do the, oh, I don't know, I'm not really sure. Then they'll just jump on you. But you know what? You don't really want that person as your boss long term.
Yeah. And I'm sure in the modern world, they won't remain as a boss long term either if they don't value development. One last question for you, Damon, which is basically, do you think you'd be in the position you are today if you didn't have the confidence you have?
No, there's absolutely no way. So, I'm from Los Angeles originally, right? I've lived in France for a little bit, and then in London, and then now in Cornwall, and I commute between Cornwall and London. There's no way on earth I'd be where I am, and I'm in a very good position. I've got a great quality of life, and my kids are thriving. So for me, that's great. I would never be here if it wasn't for that element of self-belief that you talked about. I'll give you a couple words on, I think, one of the reasons why that's possible, because I had a lot of early experiences with travel. And that is a credit to my dad, because he works for an airline. And so we were, from the 70s and 80s, we were so often the only Black family in Tahiti, in Switzerland, wherever it was we were. And those were some very difficult moments sometimes, because it felt like we were in a traveling zoo, in that we were moving through these places, but we were constantly being stared at and not engaged with. And it's, a lot of times people would go, oh yeah, there was this one party that I went to where I was the only white person. It's like, yeah, take that experience and map that across an entire lifetime. Okay. That's my life in a nutshell. And so either I was going to fold under the pressure, or I was going to thrive. And lucky for me, it was more of the latter, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. Thank you very much for coming on. I know you're a very, very busy man, so I'll let you go. Thanks for listening, everyone who will be, and please follow the Instagram and Facebook, which will be in the description. Thank you.
Thanks for the time. Take care.